I think that what my frustration is sometimes in general, right, is people negotiate from a position of no power. And they just negotiate and they just say, you know what? I want that green box and that's what I want. And I don't, and that's what I'm saying. I'm like, but like, you don't actually, like, none of you own that green box. Like, it doesn't, but people negotiate from, I think if people start to negotiate from a sense of knowledge, and you can't get to the knowledge, so everybody wants to go in fighting based on assumptions, right? We know what happens with assumptions, but it's even deeper. It's you want to fight about something based on your belief of what the other person thinks. And I'm like, why don't we just start with, what do you think? What do you know? Like, why don't we just start to clear the air and say, okay, if we had a situation, because we help big companies negotiate, and we had a situation where I was like, I think that this is what they're saying, but if it's not, we got a big problem, right? So let's just first check and see if that's what they're saying. And we said it and we clarified, and it was better than what we thought. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, stop talking. We're good with it. Yeah, stop. But I think that that's part of it, is that if, especially in any situation where there's conflict, if you can both start to, like, let's all be on even playing ground with the facts, with the knowledge. Like, instead of me thinking, Kim looks kind of mad, she's always pissed at me, things like that. And Elliot's so nice. Let's just ask them. Right. It could be reversed.
I don't know if am I pointing toward you?
Yeah. Melissa, the language I use for that, everyone comes in with their story, right? And the other person's wrong and they're right. Like, people ask me in mediation, do people come in thinking they're so right? Yeah, both sides come in thinking they're right and the other's wrong. That's just a given. So I use the language. They say their story, and I know that, it includes, I know that they're, they write their story for the other person. So I say, so the story you're telling yourself about Elliot is, blah, blah, blah. So I make it clear that, we don't know if that's true. We'll ask Elliot if that's true, but what you're telling yourself. So I use the story you're telling yourself a lot, which is a Brene Brown thing. Kudos to her for introducing that we make up a story in our mind about the other person's motives, and then it becomes our truth. And that the truth is, we need to confirm that to find out what their truth is. Yeah.
And bias comes in there too, and it's not just the bias of the parties and the attorneys, but it's also the bias of the mediator, and you need to check in with that as far as how you're perceiving the people you're working with, and making sure that you are hearing stories and not doing that confirmation bias where you think you know what the answer is, because that's when you start to trip into some dangerous area, when you think you know what the answer is, and that might not be the answer. It's their answer.
And it's a subtlety, because I had a situation recently where I'll change some of the circumstances so that they don't know, but that I had a mediator that came in. So let's say one spouse, right? So it was kind of a gender thing. And so the male mediator came into the female, and very professional, right? Goes in to the husband. Hey, where are you? Making jokes like, how's the weather? How's the cards? How's it? And I was like, and I'm being a little bit obnoxious about it. It was not, it was not to that extent. It was way more subtle. It was, they came in and was just like professional, and they came into the other party and made a joke. And I was like, and to me, it was like bright as day. And I was like, whoa, how did you but I don't think they saw it because it was like a subtlety. And really, if no one brought it up, like I'm always paying attention though. I'm paying attention to everybody.
Mhm.
Right. And so I thought that was an interesting, and we had a conversation about it. And, because it's sort of like if somebody has stuff in your teeth, don't you want somebody to tell you? Like, I felt like we had a relationship that I could say something, but and they got it. But those are the types of implied or implicit bias, that I would normally maybe see a woman and be like, oh, cute purse, love it. Even something like that, it's already changing the dynamic, like I have to come in and treat everyone just regardless of race, gender, anything, right? I can't be too familiar. I can't be too because that's what we do in relationships. Like, what do you guys think about that? Because maybe you use that sometimes, but I think that we have to be careful with how we kind of approach that. And, because I've seen it in the courthouse, we've seen it all along that we're all like in the courthouse, the hallway, and we're like, hey, what's going on? Hey, yeah. And then we get to the courtroom, and we're like, Your Honor, how are you? Or the other attorney, like we ignore them, or the other expert, but I think that you have to be careful because if the clients see that, they're going to take it very differently. So
rapport
mhm.
and trust measured with that professionalism is such a hard thing to balance. And the example that you gave, of course, was someone who was a little bit out of balance,
Mhm.
and needed to rein it back a little bit and maybe loosen it up in the other room. You need
Mhm.
to know who your audience is. And in your pre-mediation, like when I talk to the attorneys ahead of time, I try to find out a little bit more about their clients, their dispositions, what their interests are, what their favorite sports team is, or do they like to go fishing? Try to find something that you can add to the conversation without distracting from the purpose of the mediation. Because if they don't trust you, it becomes much more difficult to guide them down the road, the journey of mediation.
You gave me that advice before. You said, like you do some research on the attorneys or whatever. So I did it recently for another expert.
Mm-hmm.
Worked perfect. Like I looked at like what were his passions, what was he interested in, and there was at some point, and that's where I think all these skills you can use in any space, right?